following program is classified G. It's suitable for all ages.
Tonight, has the Sri Lankan Constitution protected its children? In the backdrop of a number of grave crimes being committed against the most vulnerable portions of society, accountability has been put into the question. In a world that is doing so much to protect its younger population, serious allegations have been raised against the lawmakers and authorities within Sri Lanka. How can we proceed to a future of safety? Are we too late in addressing the concerns of the young? Bridging the gaps between the law has become more important today than ever before in order to stop the trend of these heinous crimes. Welcome to Law, Land and Liberty, where we are keeping with the promise of bringing you a contemporary legal topic and bringing it down. Today we are going to talk about children's rights, and we are going to do this with an individual who has experience in this field and who has experience in teaching. Senior lecturer of the Faculty of Law, University of Colombo, Dr. Kokila Konasinghe. Thank you so much, Doctor, for joining us. To give our viewers a subtle breakdown of how we are going to proceed, we are firstly going to talk about law and the children's rights, how the provisions are present as of today. Next, the disciplinary action and the rights of the child and how that will go ahead. Then the society's obligations towards the rights of a child, and finally the evolution of children's law.
Hi, I'm Oshadi De Silva and I'm currently working as an accountant. I have few concerns areas regarding the law and rights of the children in Sri Lanka. So I would like to ask how well the children's rights are entrusted within the law in Sri Lanka.
All right, Doctor, if we get into the discussion directly, a wide array. One would say this topic is pretty broad, and we really break it down firstly by starting with how you would approach it. Again, as to how the law has entrusted the children's rights, or how the law has bestowed a certain amount of rights towards children, how they can enact that in the face of the law. How do you approach this, Doctor?
Yes, thank you very much, Danindu, for inviting me to discuss about this very timely and very important intervention, that is children's rights. Now, first of all, I would like to take you back to the history. And we have heard about Rajumala, Sunita, Sopaka. So all of these religious literature teach us that there is a need to protect children because they are vulnerable. So that is the fundamental basis of children's rights. And also at one point that King Suddhodana advised Lord Buddha, once the son, but after he became Buddhahood, King Suddhodana advised him not to take away children, minors, for attain monkhood without the permission of the elder parent or guardian. I think that was the first time that I learned that there is a resolution between parties, agreement between parties to respect the child's rights. So let me just start with that discussion, and then there was this series of conventions and declarations at the international level discussing about child rights, and particularly about the vulnerable community, children as a vulnerable community in the society, and the necessity to protect them. And also this was all began from the perspective of charitable responsibilities. So there are certain group of community called children, and they are vulnerable, and the law state should protect them. So that is the whole conceptual basis of children's rights and the historical perspective. So with this, let me briefly tell you that international, there are a lot of conventions on this subject, but the key convention is rights on the child, the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. So this convention is the principal international legal framework with this regard, and it has influenced many states around the world to implement and take the necessary action to protect children. So that is how this whole debate began, with protecting the child's rights.
Doctor, I think it was a very good approach that you have given to this, so that we can move into questions are being asked when there are vulnerable groups within a population. The Constitution takes the first step forward. Where do we find these protections within the Constitution, Doctor?
Excellent approach, Danindu. I must say that when we look at the national legal framework in Sri Lanka, first of all, I must say that there is a very good comprehensive set of laws to protect the children's rights. Begin with the Constitution, the supreme law of the country. Article 12 in Chapter 3, Fundamental Right Chapter, 12.1 states that all are equal before the law and entitled for the equal protection of the law. So age doesn't matter. Even a child is equal before the law, and he or she should be given equal treatment by the law. And interestingly, in Article 12.4 gives exception to certain categories of community, and states that children, women and disabled people, if the law gives extraordinary care and protection to this group of people in the community, it won't violate others' right to be equal.
Right.
So the state has the privilege of setting necessary special laws, regulations and policies in place to protect children. And not only that, there are directive principles of state policy, which is a guideline for the state to make laws.
Exactly.
And in that, Article 27.13 of the Constitution mention that the state has the obligation and the responsibility to make the systematic laws and institutions providing safeguarding children's rights. So this is the constitutional main key elements of the constitutional provisions for the purpose of protecting children's rights.
Okay. Doctor, based on that, I am assuming now when we do a bit of research on children's rights, you see a lot of policy, a lot of gazettes maybe, and even, but most of them connects back to this thing known as the National Child Protection Authority. My next question, Doctor, is now, is that the sole authority? Where do we go to in the law? Where does it say, these are the parties that are like in power? Because I think you explained really well that the Constitution really takes out women, children and people with disabilities and shows, the government has sort of like a responsibility to look after them even more. What are the other authorities, other associate legislators that are part of this?
Yes, that is a very good question, because the key institution that is responsible for the protection of children in Sri Lanka is National Child Protection Authority, and it got its powers and authorities by the National Child Protection Authority Act.
Yeah.
So Article 14 of the National Child Protection Authority Act states that the functions of the authority. Let me just briefly go through these provisions. That is, to advise the government in the formulation of a national policy on the prevention of child abuse and protection and treatment of
this is within the
children.
NCPA Act.
Exactly.
Okay.
So NCPA Act, Article 14.
Article 14.
And also to advise the government on measures for the prevention of child abuse. So you can see that this is the expert organization, institution, government institution. So the state has given the authority to this particular institution to look after all matters related to the child. And also we know that the main authority or the key guardian, supreme guardian of the children is not parents. It is the
state.
Yes, and the judiciary. So state judiciary is a part of the state, and state has given the authority to National Child Protection Authority. So in principle, the responsibility and the duties of the National Child Protection Authority is very, very high towards the protecting of children's rights. So any matter, any abuse, anything which related to any cruelty, any action against and damage the children's rights, the ultimate responsibility lies with the National Child Protection Authority.
Right. Doctor, now if a clarification can be made here, because now people will be confused mentioning, okay, now do I go and complain to the NCPA? Do I go and complain to the police? Because every police division is supposed to have a women's and children's protection unit separately.
Yes.
Clarify that to us, Doctor. I want to finish those within our first segment itself. In the event of an issue, you mentioned that the authority, the competent authority would, in this instance, would be the NCPA. How does the police come into this mix?
Exactly, because the police is also the government agent to keep maintain peace and order. So to have a peace and order in a society, the police should maintain and should ensure and safeguard rights of all. So regardless of whether a child or not, the police responsibility is extended. Now with children's matters, I think immediately we go to the police station to make a complaint. That is perfectly fine. But people should understand that in addition to the police station, because we have children's and women's desk at every police station, and you can seek assistance and extra care from that desk when it is a matter related to children. And in addition to that, people of this country should know that National Child Protection Authority is also equally established, equally equipped with all the necessary legal framework. So if a problem happens, as soon as you go to the police station, I think you can always reach an NCPA. So, and also I should mention here, there is a hotline 1929. So you can dial, any child can dial, any adult can dial if there is a record of some kind of a cruelty happening against a child, then they can report this to 1929. That is the NCPA hotline. So you have all the possibilities of accessing NCPA parallel to going to the police station.
All right. I think a very good introduction given there. Doctor, we'll go in for a short break. We have quite a few things, I think, questions that arise from the context that you have given. We'll take a very short break. You're with Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us.
And I'm an employed graduate in accounting and finance. My question is about the disciplinary action and rights of the child. What disciplinary action is possible against the child?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Dr. Kokila Konasinghe, a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Law in the University of Colombo. Doctor, once again, we have given a very good approach to this topic. I want to take it a step further now that we spoke about concerns, we spoke about how complaints can be made. The next step is, Doctor, now when it's children, there is this question of corporal punishment, where within schools, even within disciplining a child at home, a grey area, one would say. Some people are not aware of what exactly the rights are of the child. How do you approach this? It's a rather sensitive topic, but how do you approach this, Doctor?
Yes. It is sensitive because the way we look at it. But I personally believe that discipline should be maintained in any human being if you want to make a person with full personality, balanced personality. But where do we draw the line? Now, the psychologists have done researches and found out that the punishment to children is a way of releasing someone else's stress pressure or depression. That is where we should draw the line. And with that note, I will go to 1939 Education Ordinance. And according to Education Ordinance, caning a child is permitted. It was permitted. But we have this 2001 Ministry of Education circular that prohibited any kind of corporal punishment.
That is the most recent development in this.
Yes.
Okay.
And with that development, the teachers, principals and whoever, parents, cannot give corporal punishment to a child. And also, we know that 1995, number 22 Penal Code Amendment, section 308, cruelty to children is an offence. So if this punishment is amount to cruelty, explained in section 308, then it is a criminal offence as well. So now we have 2006 Penal Code Amendment, again amended further amendments to this section by adding injury to include psychological and mental trauma as well.
Right.
So you know how we all have been punished in schools, and we know how that actually was helpful for our development. But now the situation has becoming very serious, where we have many cases reported under Article 11 of the Constitution, that is freedom from torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. So there are so many cases filed against school teachers and principals and other authorities under Article 11, saying that this is a torture, cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. So when you look at taking all these laws, Danidu, you can see that corporal punishment is no longer a healthy practice as well as legally approved practice.
Just to clarify, Doctor, so in those scenarios it's a fundamental rights issue that is being raised against the child.
Yes.
We will continue that discussion, Doctor. Now, questions can be raised about the restrictions in schools may be a bit clear, but when it comes to the home environment, because the law does recognize, I believe, as you mentioned, assault is something that is recognized. You can't touch an individual without, those things are there. But when it comes to child, is it any much more worse? Are the sentences any more stricter? How does that differentiation happen?
Yes, that is a very sad and pathetic situation that we have to deal in the present day society, with the lot of pressure coming from the parents and guardians. So that is the where you expect protection, love and protection and care. And that is the place that you do not get it, and your personality will be damaged, and you will be treated cruelly, and also you will be neglected. So these physical and mental traumas and damages are covered by another act, a very popular act, Prevention of Domestic Violence Act number 34 of 2005. So under this act, Section 23 states that under this act, a child is considered as someone who is under the age of 18. So whoever under the age of 18, as you correctly point out, within the domestic household, if that child is treated and that child is treated with some sort of a punishment, inhuman, degrading treatment and cruelty, then it is entitled to go to the magistrate and request for a protection order. So that law is very, very important, because as you said that where you expect the highest protection, where you do not have that environment, so peaceful environment. And also, on behalf of a minor, one of the parents or someone who is living in that household, and also a neighbor, and also someone is authorized by the National Child Protection Authority, can make this complaint to the magistrate. So while living together with the person who is torturing you or harassing you, the child will be protected by the law. So it doesn't encourage to separate relationship, damage relationship within a household. Can be a parent, can be an elderly person. So it won't damage this cultural aspect of family, but while keeping it, there is a protection covered the vulnerable person, that is the child, by the law under this act. So this is this Prevention of Domestic Violence Act is something that I think we have to be aware of.
Doctor, another question that might come out when we discuss this is now, since we have really identified the NCPA as the authority in this scenario, just to clarify, I think you mentioned this in passing, the NCPA also will be complaining to the magistrate, is it, or how does the NCPA carry that out if there is some form of complaint that is lodged with them?
In Sri Lanka, if a child under the age of 18 is facing such a situation, then NCPA has a responsibility to protect that child. Therefore, NCPA can authorize a person, an officer, to represent the child's right at the magistrate court. So that person can, on behalf of the child, can request for a protection order. Okay.
Doctor, within our discussions initially also you mentioned that there's a lot of case law pertaining to this, also a lot of sensitive case matter. When it comes to corporal punishment, now you did mention it is clear, very direct mentioning that corporal punishment is not allowed. How has this really taken face within the law? How has this really taken when it comes to the legal, sort of like the case law aspect of this? Do we see examples of the courts being strict on this and really showing that children have an avenue here within the law?
Yes. Recently there was a case actually interpreted this very much in favor of the child, but I must admit at the same time that it is not very common. Because we are in a society and a culture that we believe that the punishment by the teacher should be treated differently. So therefore the social attitude in addition to law is very important in these situations, Danidu. So therefore legal awareness programs like this is very important, because we have to raise the understanding of the adults, previous generations, to understand that the child should not be subjected to any form of cruelty, because it should be 100% perfect atmosphere, peaceful atmosphere should be there for the balance, the growth of the balanced human being. Therefore, I should say that there have been very, not very common, but there are certain cases coming up recently that has been interpreted in favor of the child. Okay. But what I mentioned was the attitudes, social attitudes, and the acceptance of the disciplinary action. What is disciplinary action and to what extent that it should be practiced is still a question mark.
Okay. A very good line to end our discussion for the second segment, where these vacuums are something that we really need to focus on. Before we go into our break, we have Suzanne Shenali standing by to give us the happenings within this week with the legal field, within this country. Here is a look at the law in the land.
Thank you, Danidu. Let's take a look as to how the law has worked in our land. The Colombo High Court set the 6th of September to hear the evidence of the bribery case filed by the Bribery Commission against former Finance Minister Ravi Karunanayake and Perpetual Treasuries Director Arjun Aloysius. When the case was taken up before the Colombo High Court judge, both Ravi Karunanayake and Arjun Aloysius appeared before the court. The Colombo Chief Magistrate ordered former Deputy Minister Sarana Gunawardena to be released from 8 cases filed by the Bribery Commission against him during the tenure of the Yapalina government. Gunawardena had been charged with committing corruption by allegedly causing losses to the government in renting vehicles to the Development Lotteries Board during his tenure as its chairman. The Attorney General's Department informed the Colombo High Court trial at bar that the abduction charges against former Navy Commander Admiral of the Fleet Wasantha Karanagoda will not be moved forward. The celebrated war veteran and former Navy Commander was named the 14th defendant in the case filed against a group of naval intelligence officers pertaining to the alleged forced disappearance of 11 youths. The appeal court issued an interim injunction preventing future action being taken regarding statements and recommendations made by the Presidential Commission of Inquiry on Political Victimization in connection with Senior State Counsel Janaka Bandara. This interim injunction was issued when a writ petition filed by the Senior State Counsel requesting that recommendations regarding him issued by the Commission will be declared null and void was taken up for consideration. The Colombo High Court released the former directors of Agrisinga Trust Investments on bail over the 7 billion rupee misappropriation case. The suspects were taken into custody on charges of criminal misappropriation, cheating, money laundering, among other charges. Following the serving of indictments to the accused, the Colombo High Court fixed the trial for the 8th of September. That was a look at the major events of how the law has worked in our land. We will now go into a short commercial break. Zanindu will be back after the break.
Hello, my name is Reha De Silva and I am a first year LLB student. My question is on societal obligations. What are society's obligations towards children?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in conversation with Dr. Kokila Konasinghe, Senior Lecturer at the University of Colombo. Doctor, our next segment we are going to really dive into social and societal obligations. And my first question, I'll keep it brief and then we'll dive into different areas. What are the obligations society has in general towards children? This question comes up with things like practical situations, doctor. Things like, if I see a child being harassed or assaulted, what is my responsibility? How do I proceed from that point onwards? Do I have a responsibility? Is that accountability transferred to me? How do we approach that, doctor?
That is why I mentioned at the very beginning that everybody should note down this number, this hotline 1929. So please make it a compulsory note in on your phones and on your diaries, because that is very important. Because we are a society who live in a community and we believe in community responsibilities. We had social responsibilities towards protecting children, but now we do not see that anymore. So that is very important, that each one of us should believe that every child is our own. So we should treat them equally and we should take actions whenever needed. And with this regard, I think this 1929 number should be very well promoted.
Exactly.
And everybody who sees in your neighborhood can be in your neighbor's house. There can be domestic servants who will be treated badly and abused. Can you keep quiet any longer? No. You can always dial this number, because confidentiality will be protected with this hotline. And also, I think that social responsibility is very, very high in this regard, because you cannot employ a child until the age of 16. And there are so many acts and statutes that prevent children from being employed are below the age of 16. Because according to the Child Rights Convention, primary education is compulsory, free and compulsory, and that is state's responsibility. So in line with that, the Sri Lankan government in various acts have been changed and amended to lift up the age of employment to 16. It was 14.
Within that, Doctor, if you could also tell us the education requirement also goes to 16, is it?
Yes.
Compulsory education, okay.
Yes. So by 2016, there was this amendment to Education Ordinance. So the compulsory age of education is 16. So until 16, nobody can be employed and nobody can prevent attending schools. And also it is interesting that the parents have the responsibility of ensuring that the child is attending school, but it is not punishable if they violate that. Why? Because the state has the primary responsibility. So state should be ensure that all the necessary laws and regulations and actions will be in place if a child does not attend school. So we all know that it is a common practice during the harvest season. There is a large number of students absent, and even in the university, I mean, that is where I am coming from. So even university, we see that a lot of children absent due to various social family commitment, and some of them are sole breadwinner for the family. So there is a very unfortunate incidence and side to this compulsory education issue. So therefore the state should ensure and provide all the facilities and the necessary system in place to ensure that children will attend school until the age of 16. Mm-hmm. So therefore these two laws are going in parallel. Especially I should mention Shop and Office Employees Act, and also Employment of Women, Young Persons and Children's Act. And in this particular act in 1956, there was an amendment to Section 20. And according to Section 20, no child under 18 should be employed in work related to hazards and also night shifts.
Okay.
So it's not only 16, there are certain limitations. Even under 18, children cannot be employed under these areas.
Okay.
Okay. So that is how the law has been implemented. So,
Doctor, I think that gives us a good understanding. Now questions are being raised as to how practical this has been, and on the ground how well this is being coordinated. In the event of, let's say, this children are being, as you mentioned, children are being employed underage, or if there's an issue of that sort, I come back to my initial question, Doctor, whether the people have a responsibility legally. Maybe morally you have mentioned that there is a clear requirement. Legally, will there be a responsibility that will be put on?
Actually, as far as I know, you can't sue a person for not taking actions. It is, I believe that as human beings, we all have responsibilities. So it is up to a certain individual to take action or not. I personally know that there are certain women's rights activists and children's rights activists, and in the academia as well. I personally know that you do not have any kind of relationship to certain children involved in certain situations, but we take action. Exactly. We complain to the police station, we complain to the NCPA, and if I share my personal experience with you, because you asked this question, every day, a couple of months ago when we travel, I saw a child being carried by a gentleman. Outer appearance is a beggar, okay. And I got this instinct that, because I am a mother perhaps, I got this instinct that this should not be a father, the way that person carried and the way he treated. So we took action. Okay. We took action. but it is very confidentially. It was very confidentially handled, and finally we got to know that he has no relationship whatsoever to that girl who is about 4-5 years old, and all sorts of molestation, abuse took place in the middle of the day, in the middle of the city.
Right.
And unless we took action, then that would have continued. So even within the household, even within the education environment, this can happen. Even within the religious, social, cultural setup, these things can happen. So as a responsible individual, it is your duty. So I do not think that anyone can be sued for not taking action unless you are duty bound. Officially, if you are duty bound to take actions, and if you are neglecting that, then you can be sued. But otherwise, I don't think so.
Two more areas that I want to speak with you about, Doctor, before we go into our last segment. One, we can't hide from the fact that social media now exists, and it's very abundant. It plays a huge role in children's life, and many even other countries aren't too clear with how to address the amount of things that are happening within social media. This might be going a little bit towards the cybercrime issues, Doctor, but whatever you can address to us, just explain to us, Doctor. Now, when there is information being sent around within social media, how can children be protected? How, if there are images being shared around, which is a concern that even Senior DIG Ajit Rohan has really put a lot of stress on, and really trying to fight that issue of blackmail and things like that. Are there incentives? Can the children, can the parents go to the courts, go to the law for incentives there?
First of all, as a legal academic and a lawyer and a mother, I should say, before going into that stage, look at your child, spend time with your child, and take care of the child. Sometimes we know everything about the world, but we know very little about what is going on in our own children's lives. So I think you should love unconditionally to your children. So the children should feel protection, caring within your own household. So prior going to the court, going to the NCPA, going to the police station, parents, please take the necessary action to provide unconditional love to your children. So moving on to the legal framework, I think that parents, if they get to know about these things, because these things are very, very common, especially with online education, children have access to these equipments and websites unlimited. So that is something that we have to seriously think about as a country. With all due respect to conducting online lessons and moving forward with the education without any disruption to the country's education. But at the same time, there are so many bad effects happen as a consequence of this practice. So I would say that if a parent or a guardian or someone finds out about this, please complain. Do not wait, because once an image is gone out to the website, it's gone out forever. It's gone out of hand. So sometimes there is very little that you can do once it is happened. So precautionary actions are what I really press here. But once it is happened, the criminal investigation department is the one that is handling these issues. So you can complain to the CID. So they will take the necessary action to minimize the damage. So I don't think you can prevent, but you cannot completely eradicate the damage. But at the same time, do not think that it happens to someone else's child, my child is protected. When a protest or a voice should be raised, do not consider that it is not your matter. It is our matter as parents, as responsible citizens of this country. I think everybody should take action as as well as that if anything happens to someone else's child, help, support, stand by those people. What is happening right now is that child's image is out, my child is safe, so we can have a jolly well time. No, it is not so. We are a community, we are a responsible community. So whatever happens to the other person can, the very next day can happen to mine. Mm-hmm. So that kind of initiatives should be taken by the people of this country, I think.
A very, very good message there, Doctor. We'll go into our last segment and continue discussion about the vacuums and the other issues that exist within our legal system. You're with Law, Land and Liberty. Stay with us when we go into our last segment.
Hello, my name is Dinesh and I am a history student. My question is about the evolution of children's law. How should laws for children evolve to cater to the 21st century?
Welcome back to Law, Land and Liberty. We are in our last segment. We are in conversation with Dr. Kokila Konasinghe, the senior lecturer at the University of Colombo, the Faculty of Law. Doctor, we covered a lot of ground. We really mentioned a lot of key important things within the first few segments. My next question, it'll be broader than the others, and it'll be on let me give some context to this question before we get into it, Doctor, because when you look at the United States, there are things like the Amber Alert system, where it's sort of like a blacklist model where you identify or you ask the community to help you with regards to finding an individual. There are structured methods through which a child is taken into a system, looked after, and then given to either a foster family or like the family alone. Very, very careful when it comes to handling children. Now, maybe we don't have to go there, we do, but we don't have to go there overnight. But if you can, Doctor, in the ways you have seen it, how, because we don't, as you very rightly mentioned, we don't want to remove families, we don't want to break families apart, but we also need to protect the most vulnerable portions of society. In all of this sort of this mess, where do you see that we need to improve on, where we need to take the first few steps forward?
As a society, I would say, please stop. Stop for a while and look around. See what is happening around us. With the development process and also development of information technology, there are drastic changes taken place, and also children are exposed to this world limitlessly. Therefore, I think we have to, first of all, I would really like to re-establish our own cultural, religious, social setup that we used to grow up. And the neighbors, parents, elders, we all lived together. And we had extended families, not nuclear families. And everybody takes care of everyone's children. And there was not very serious issues as it is today. But now we are living in a society that we have to take action. And the state has to interfere with this. I think few decades ago, the state has a very limited role playing in protection of child. And the parents, families, and the religious and education setup took responsibilities of molding the child and protecting the child. But today, the state has to directly interfere. Police, criminal investigation department, they have to step in. NCPA, there is a particular institution has set up to protect children. We can see how dangerous the situation is. So with that, I would say that there are certain things, gaps that we have identified in children's rights. This is not the time to elaborate on everything, but I will pinpoint certain very important key issues. I think the law has to take very seriously about the age of the child. According to the international standards, it should be 18 years. Below 18 years, it is a child. So that is the international standards. Even in Western countries, that is what is applicable. Under 18, it is a child. But in Sri Lanka, we have various, very diverse. Who is a child? Okay, according to this act, child is this. According to this act, child is this. It should not be like that. It should be uniform. The child is someone under the age of 18. We have to seriously think about this. We have to take necessary amendments immediately. And also we know that under certain special laws, even a girl at the age of 12 can get married. And imagine the international standard is 18 and the age of 12 someone can get married. What is the maturity, what is the social responsibility with that particular child? And also this age of 16 limit. And there are a lot of concerns between the age of 16 and 18. What is the responsibility of that age gap? So that is also something that I would emphasize that necessary necessary amendments. And also this online sexual trafficking has become a very serious issue in Sri Lanka today. So again, I will go back to the same discussion that the parents' responsibility in that. And also things like counseling. So these things should be institutionalized. But I do not advise that it should be as similar to some other countries, because we should find our own roots and we should find the solutions out of that. Because certain counseling patterns or methods may not applicable to our culture. So therefore we should do a proper research on this and then find our own way of counseling, and it should be institutionalized in the education system, because many child abuse, sexual abuse, sexual trafficking and many unfortunate incidents with children are passed by without notice.
Exactly. Doctor, if I could get your take on this as well. You were very clear when you mentioned the NCPA is the authority in charge constitutionally, as in by the law it has been empowered, then the police would enforce certain parts of it because they have the manpower and everything. What about the responsibilities that fall on the other segments? You were very clear with parents having responsibility also, and they are duty bound by the law. Now, we have read in certain scenarios the parents have responsibility to look after a child up until this age, or up until this age, even if it's not a child, even if it's a youth. Touch on that as well, Doctor, and if you could mention to us, what are the other institutions that have this authority, like a school maybe, or a public place where a bus, somewhere that a child is going on? Does these accountability or these responsibilities extend to those places also, to a teacher maybe, to the person who drives a bus, to a person who maybe handles a shop? Do those responsibilities trickle down to those areas?
Absolutely, absolutely. Because according to the Child Rights Convention and all the laws that I mentioned here says that when a child is in custody with someone, okay. Imagine now we have a domestic servant and she doesn't have her parents with her at that moment, and she's been sexually abused. And whose responsibility is that? That is whose she is under the custody of. So the employer is entirely responsible for that, and he or she should take immediate action to stop it. So that is how it is. So when you travel in a public transport, the driver and the conductor have responsibilities for the welfare and protection of the child. And if you are a teacher, if you are a government servant, education officer, you have more responsibilities than other people in the society. And like academics ourselves, lawyers, like ourselves, we have more responsibilities than the other segment of the society. So that is why I would like to emphasize that this should be a teamwork. The protection of the children means, Danindu, is protection of our future. So we should look up to the future with happy vision and sustainable vision. Can we do that with half-boiled eggs? No. So the whole society, including you and I, are responsible for this.
All right. Doctor, as a last and final question to give a conclusive sort of message within all of this, I think you mentioned that putting accountability, this moral issue within the law is something that we have to bridge. You did mention there are vacuums, there are certain things that we need to pinpoint. As the very next step or the very first step that we should take in going forward, in protecting the children, as a very general question, Doctor, where should we be doing? What should we be doing as of now?
Let me take it like this, Danindu. Now we represent the legal community and the education community. So likewise, we have health community, we have police department, and we have several other responsible segments of society. So we should start from identifying our gaps and then finding the solutions. So if the legal community has a responsibility, I would say that we should introduce necessary amendments for the terrible certain practices in this country approved legally. Okay. So likewise, in the health sector, in the other sectors of the society should take their own responsibilities into their hands in protecting of the child, because child is our future, and without that we cannot think of a survival of this earth. So that is my final comment on this, Danindu.
All right. Thank you so much, Doctor. I think a very good place to end our discussion. Dr. Kokila Konasinghe, the Senior Lecturer of the Faculty of Law in the University of Colombo. Thank you so much for joining us. All right. The discussion brought to light the advances and the vacuums that exist within the legal system to protect the children of a country. Children are basically simpler version of adults. I was fortunate enough to encounter a simple phrase which captures the great responsibility adults have towards children by a man considered to be the father of South Africa, Nelson Mandela. He once mentioned that safety and security don't just happen. They are the result of collective consensus and public investment. We owe our children, the most vulnerable citizens in our society, life free of violence and fear. That is all from us here at Law, Land and Liberty. Join us again next week as we break down another contemporary legal topic. I'm Danis Zanwasam. Have a great night.